a long journey escaping a war-torn homeland only to end up in a haunted house. The film begins by showing a married couple named Bol and Rial, along with their daughter Niagak. They are originally from South Sudan. At first, they lived their lives peacefully, until one day, war broke out in their village. The war claimed the lives of many innocent people. Their friends and relatives were among the victims of the conflict. Feeling unsafe to stay there any longer, the three of them decided to flee to another country. They desperately boarded a small boat in the middle of a storm at sea. Because the boat was overloaded and the storm was raging, it capsized, causing most of the refugees, including Niagak, to die in the incident. Meanwhile, Bol and Rial managed to survive the horrific tragedy. They both felt deep guilt for not being able to protect their daughter. Afterward, Bol and Rial finally arrived in England. There, they had to stay in an asylum first. An asylum is a place of refuge in a country dedicated to protecting refugees who come from other nations. While in the asylum, the refugees are assessed to determine whether they are eligible to stay permanently in the country or deemed ineligible and therefore sent back to their homeland. Bol himself was very eager to start a new life in England.
£74 in total. You do not have...
3 months after staying in the asylum, Bol and Rial were given the opportunity to live closer to English society. The government hoped they could adapt to the local community. However, before being granted permanent residency, they had to follow several rules set by the government, such as not being allowed to work, having to use government-provided allowances wisely, reporting their conditions to government officials every week, and living in a house already assigned by the government. If they broke any of these rules, the government could revoke their chance to become citizens of England. That night, they were escorted to their new house located on the outskirts of London. When they arrived at the house, they were greeted by a government officer named Mark. He immediately took them on a tour around the house.
Screws for your door. There's a shop round the corner. Yours? I think you two are going to be all right.
While walking, Mark explained several rules that they were not allowed to break, such as no pets, no parties, no candles, and other regulations they had to obey. The house was actually designed for 4 people, but since it was the only one available, the government gave it to Bol and Rial. With a bit of fixing and cleaning, the house would be suitable for the 2 of them to live in. Bol and Rial looked very happy because they could finally start a new life. However, deep inside, they still thought about Niagak, who had died because they failed to save her. If only they had managed to rescue Niagak when the boat capsized, she would still be alive. One day, while Bol was in the living room, he heard a strange noise from behind the wall. When he checked, it turned out to be just a bird. That night, Bol suddenly woke up after hearing another strange sound from behind the wall of the house. When he looked closely, he found a big hole behind the wallpaper. From inside the hole, Bol pulled out a very long wire that gradually turned into a rope. He kept pulling until he found Niagak's doll tied to it. Suddenly, a mysterious hand snatched the doll away. When Bol's gaze shifted, the hole in the wall instantly vanished. He then decided to strip off all the wallpaper in the living room. The next morning, Rial woke up and was shocked to see the wallpaper in the living room had been removed by Bol. She immediately looked for him but discovered he was out shopping for household items at the supermarket. Rial then went to a nearby clinic. On her way there, she struggled to find the right direction. She bravely asked a local for help, but although the person showed her the way, they also made racist remarks toward her, leaving Rial deeply saddened. When she finally arrived at the clinic, she was examined by a female doctor. Rial and the doctor talked about her life before coming to England, where she had been forced to live amid the chaos of war. Rial had witnessed countless deaths in the past. On her way back from the clinic, she bought some groceries before heading home. Later, while resting in the living room, Rial directly experienced something supernatural. One of the apples she had just bought suddenly fell and rolled on its own toward a small hole in the wall. From inside the hole, she saw the presence of a wandering spirit. Seeing this made Rial terrified and completely shocked. That night, Bol and Rial had dinner together. Back in their homeland, they used to eat with their hands while sitting on the floor, but now Bol wanted to change their habits to match those in England. He gave Rial a spoon and fork so they would no longer eat with their hands. Bol seemed very eager to adapt to his new life in this country, so he tried to follow the local culture. However, Rial looked uncomfortable using the utensils. She then began telling a story about a kind but poor man. One day, this man dared to steal something from an old man who lived by the river. The kind man had no idea that the old man was actually an apith, a night witch. Because of his ignorance, the witch sent many spirits to haunt the man in his home. In the end, the witch devoured the man alive as punishment for his theft. Rial told Bol that ever since they moved into the house, she had been visited by a black witch. The witch told her that Bol and Rial must return to their homeland and pay for something they once stole from someone else. It seemed that before they came to this country, Bol and Rial had committed some kind of wrongdoing involving theft. However, it was still unclear what crime they had committed that angered the Night Witch and caused him to send spirits to haunt their home. After hearing Rial's story, Bol didn't believe her words and refused to return to their country. He no longer wanted to face the life of fear brought by war.
We survived.
I had assured myself it was a dream.
Later, Bol started cleaning the walls in one of the rooms. While busy tidying up, he was suddenly disturbed by the ghost of a little girl, who turned out to be Nyagak. Strangely, Nyagak's spirit tried to attack Bol with a knife. Terrified, Bol ran out of the house. Haunted by this ghostly encounter, Bol began to believe they had brought a cursed object from their homeland. Determined to end the terror, he burned all the belongings they had brought with them, hoping it would stop the evil spirits. The next day, Bol went to the mall to buy some modern clothes so that he and Rial could blend in with the locals. He immediately gave the clothes to Rial and asked her to wear them. Bol also repaired the house's electrical wiring so that all the lights would work properly. But during dinner with Rial that evening, Bol suddenly experienced a terrifying hallucination, seeing himself surrounded by the sea filled with horrifying spirits. It turned out that everything was just Bol's nightmare. But when he woke up, he once again experienced a supernatural disturbance, seeing many terrifying spirits around him. He also heard their whispers begging for help. Then he saw Nyagak's spirit among them. Suddenly, Nyagak's spirit turned off the living room light, causing the other spirits to appear and surround Bol. They began to approach and tried to harm him. Struggling, Bol managed to turn the lights back on and the spirits vanished. He realized that the spirits only appeared in darkness and would disappear when there was light. Just as he felt slightly relieved, he noticed that the spirits were actually hiding inside the walls of his house. Frustrated by their presence, Bol desperately smashed the walls. He started to believe that the haunting was happening because the house itself was cursed. Because of this, he asked Mark to find them a new house. Bol claimed he wanted to move because their current home was infested with rats, which made him and Rial uncomfortable. Mark and his colleague then went to Bol's house to check the situation. When they arrived, Mark was shocked to see the walls full of holes that Bol had destroyed. He doubted the damage was caused by rats and told Bol that he had to file a report about it. Hearing this, Bol begged Mark not to tell the government. He was afraid that he and Rial would be sent back to their country for damaging government property. Feeling sympathetic, Mark decided not to report it. Shortly after, Rial came in and explained to them that there were no rats in the house at all. Their home was actually filled with spirits sent by the Night Witch. She had already told Bol about this, but he chose not to believe her. Mark and his colleague eventually left, looking unconvinced by Rial's explanation. After they were gone, Rial and Bol started arguing again. Rial said she didn't want to stay there any longer and wanted to return to their homeland. She was afraid the witch would harm them if they remained. But once again, Bol refused to leave. Since Rial insisted on going, Bol locked all the exits, including doors and windows, so she couldn't escape. After that, Bol went to the living room and lit a candle. He intended to confront the witch who was said to be haunting him and Rial. Bol waited for the witch's arrival until night fell. Finally, he encountered the night witch in his subconscious. The witch demanded that Bol take his own life, promising in return to bring Nyagak back from the dead. However, Bol refused and began to doubt the witch's power. As a result, the night witch demonstrated his strength, forcing Bol into a nightmare. In reality, Bol's body remained frozen like a statue. Out of sheer terror, he even wet himself in the real world. Rial, confused by what was happening to Bol, decided to use the chance to escape while he was unconscious. But suddenly Bol awoke and tried to stop her from leaving. Unfortunately for him, Rial managed to get out of the house. Jumping through a window, she fell and lost consciousness. While unconscious, Rial dreamed of meeting her friends back in Sudan. She also dreamed of the events before they fled to England. The truth was finally revealed. Bol and Rial had never actually had a child. Nyagak was someone else's daughter whom Bol had kidnapped so he could board a rescue bus. When Bol and Rial tried to escape their village, they were required to board the bus, but only women and children were prioritized and allowed to enter. Desperate to secure a spot, Bol lied to the guard, claiming Nyagak was his daughter. Because of this, Bol was allowed to get on the bus. As the bus departed, Nyagak kept calling out for her real mother, who was left behind.
Wait! She's in town!
Feeling pity for the girl, Rial promised to always protect her. Sadly, during the incident on the boat, Bol and Rial failed to save Nyagak in time, and she drowned. Rial was devastated by her death and blamed herself for not being able to protect her. From this revelation, it became clear why the Night Witch was pursuing Bol and Rial. He sought to punish Bol for abducting Nyagak from her true mother. The Night Witch then offered Rial a deal. If she wanted Nyagak to come back to life, she would have to allow him to take Bol's soul. Not long after, Rial regained consciousness and realized that Bol had carried her back inside the house. She began to feel conflicted about what to do after being given the witch's offer. On one hand, she deeply wished to have Nyagak alive again, but on the other hand, she could not allow Bol to die. In the midst of Rial's doubt, Bol suddenly cut his own hand. He knew that he had to pay a life debt to atone for kidnapping Nyagak from her mother. He was certain that the Night Witch would soon come to kill him, so he asked Rial to stay away from him. Moments later, the Night Witch revealed his true form and began devouring Bol's body. Just as Bol was on the brink of death, Rial intervened and killed the Night Witch. She realized that something already dead could never be brought back to life. What she could do now was to continue living alongside Bol, who was still alive. After slaying the Night Witch, Bol and Rial were finally able to live in peace again. However, even though the witch was gone, the spirits he had sent to their house still lingered. In the end, Bol and Rial decided to coexist with the spirits. The final scene shows Mark arriving at their home with a government team to check on them. Since Bol and Rial had managed to adapt to their new environment, it seemed they would be allowed to stay longer. The house appeared to be filled with spirits, yet Bol and Rial looked happy, and thus the story came to an end.